there's talk about 18 games during your playing career. What are your thoughts on that?
I thought the 17 was insane. 18 is like, I can't even. 18 and international, more international. These are all CBA negotiated things as well. So it's like, we could certainly make cases for things that we could change in our CBA it wouldn't make it great, but it would certainly make it a lot better. It's certainly not ideal for the players.
Welcome in. It is the Tuesday, June 10 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. I am your host, Ari Meirov, and since it is a Tuesday, that means we have a special Spotlight guest of the week. And for today's episode, we are going back to the player side, and we are going to be joined by New York Giants wide receiver Darius Slayton, a player who has now been with the Giants 7 years, somebody who has had ups and downs in his career, and some of the downs I don't think really fans know about most of it. It has to do with the business side of football, a really, really fun conversation. We talked for 30 minutes, and frankly, I could have gone an hour and a half with them because it was such an enjoyable conversation. We will talk more about what is happening around the NFL on the back end of the show. We had some big news over the course of Tuesday, but for now, here is my special spotlight interview with New York Giants receiver Darius Slayton. Joining us today here on NFL Spotlight, he is now entering his 7th NFL season, all of which have been with the New York Giants. He was a Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee last year, and just this offseason was rewarded with a very well-deserved 3-year extension. It is Darius Slayton. Darius, what's going on? How's everything going? Thanks so much for doing this.
Everything's going good. Appreciate you guys having me on.
For sure. And this is the NFL Spotlight Show. We love spotlighting people who deserve more recognition, and your career has been a really cool one, inspiring one, and has had a lot of interesting turning points throughout all of it. But we like going through people's journeys here on the show. And I kind of want to start from the beginning with you, where you were a 4-star recruit out of high school, where you played receiver and cornerback, but you also were one of the very best track athletes in your state. You won state titles at 100 meters, 200 meters. I was curious to ask you, what made you choose football and wide receiver as your future when you had other paths also as potential?
Yeah, I mean, it was always football for me. I started, ironically, I only started running track really because my sister was running. And, I was always at the meets and the practices because my mom used to pick us both up after school. So I used to have to wait for my sister. And I was always at the track meets, and the track coach was like, "You're always at the meets eating all the snacks." He's like, "You might as well run." And so I was like, "I guess I'll start running." So, track was fun. I enjoyed track, but it was all football was always the goal for me.
And I guess, how did you end up picking receiver and quarterback? You played both. What was your decision to end up going with receiver? Did you just like being on the offensive side of ball more?
Yeah, when I originally got my offers and all that, it was for defense, most of them. And then I remember I went to the opening the summer of my senior year. So coming out of my junior year, going to my senior year, Nike used to have the opening out in Oregon, and I got invited out there to play corner. And just being around other corners and being around the top guys, I kind of realized I don't love this corner. I love competing, and part of corners, if you stop the guy, then it's it's a great feeling. And I love that aspect of it. But I was I'm not wired these other guys that are out here. It's my heart's more in offense. And then I also want to play in the SEC. And to be honest, going to visits at Georgia and LSU and Alabama and seeing Todd Gurley and Leonard Fournette and Derrick Henry at these schools, I was like, yeah, I'm not tackling these guys. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, it's a smart move by you. And you mentioned going to all those SEC schools, but I mentioned before, you were born in Georgia. You were a star high school athlete in Georgia. Your senior year in high school, you committed to Georgia. And then on the eve of signing day, you flipped over to Auburn. What was that like for you? And what was the overall reaction of doing that and ending up in Auburn?
Yeah, I actually probably had the most undramatic, uninteresting recruiting process until then. Intentionally, I've never been a big attention guy or anything, but honestly, I committed to Georgia and I was fully committed. And then like I said, a lot of schools, like once I came back from my senior year and I started telling schools like, look, like I want to play a receiver, I want to play offense, like I'm not doing this corner thing. And almost every school was like, cool, fine. There's like a few schools that were like, we'll take you either way or both ways, whatever. And then there was Auburn was one of like two schools that was like, no, like we just want you for defense, like don't need you as a receiver, cool, fine. So I ended up going to Georgia. But my family's Auburn fans. I have a relative that played for Auburn back in the day. It's like my mom, a lot of my cousins, and my mom's from Alabama. So, my family's like 50-50 Auburn, Alabama, but a lot of Auburn fans. And Auburn came back around in January that year. Back when now there's like 50 signing days. Back when signing day was just on February, or something like that. First week of February back then.
Yeah.
And Auburn called me, like January. Gus called me. He's like, hey, like we fired our defensive staff. He's like, we'd love to have you as a receiver, if you give us a chance. And I just gave it a chance. I was like, I'll come on a visit and I'll see what it's about. And, it was a very trying time, but night before signing day, I was flipping quarters and playing eeny, meeny, miny, mo and praying and trying to figure out, what to do. And I ended up choosing the Tigers.
You mentioned a family member being at Auburn. That was your cousin Daryl Crawford back in the 90s who played at Auburn, but you ended up making that switch over to Auburn. And really, you obviously redshirted your freshman year, but all of a sudden, sophomore year and really junior year is where you really become a linchpin for that offense. And your junior season included setting an Auburn record in a bowl game with 160 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns versus Purdue. You end up ending up going to the NFL draft, and you get picked by the Giants in the 5th round. I was looking back at this, like your projections going into that draft, it was more in that 3rd to 4th round range. What was draft day like for you, draft week like for you? And were you, I guess, disappointed that you fell all the way to the 5th round and were the 18th receiver taken, which now here in 2025 sounds insane?
Yeah, I was extremely angry watching the draft. So angry. Some of the most angry I've ever been in my life. Just obviously, I was realistic about my projections. I knew I was at best a day two, a late day two guy, maybe an early day three guy. But to be honest, without saying names, it's like you just watch the draft and you see guys go ahead of you, and you're like, there's just no way they turned on his tape and my tape, and they were like, yeah, draft that guy. And it was a trying day for me, but obviously, it was a blessing in disguise. I was obviously happy once I got picked, and I've been a Giant, and I've done pretty solid for myself since.
It's crazy to think about just being that late in the draft. And what makes it even more crazier is the fact that in your rookie year, you make an immediate impact with the team with 48 catches, 740 yards, 8 touchdowns, which were top 10 in the NFL among all players. What was that rookie year like for you? And how are you able to just, fit in, be a guy who's making plays as a 22-year-old and a 5th round pick? Like, what was the overall rookie year like for you?
It was crazy. I didn't know what to expect. A lot of people don't know, but I got hurt the second day of training camp my rookie year. So I barely did training camp my rookie year. Like I practiced maybe 5 days total. I played in one preseason game against the Bengals. I probably played like 10 or 12 plays. I caught like one go ball though in the Cincinnati game. And yeah, I pulled my hamstring, and I just was like trying to get back, but I was struggling with it, and I didn't really get healthy until like week 3. And I got my first little, toe in the water. I had a couple catches that game, had a pretty good game. And then, it kind of rolled from there. But yeah, rookie year was a crazy year. We had signed Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate to big deals that year. So it's like I got drafted, but like there was also 2 deals in the room. So you knew those guys were going to be in the starting rotation and getting the ball a lot. So I was just trying to find my way.
One of the things about you that is obviously a standout is your speed 4.39 at the combine. We mentioned the track before and how you were pretty successful at that, even though it was kind of because of your sister. You've averaged 15 yards per catch throughout your career, which is 5th in the NFL. It's quite incredible. What do you think about your game allows you to create so many big plays like that?
I think a lot of what I do like looks unassuming on film. Like, my speed, my quickness, I feel like looks unassuming. And so when the game day actually comes, I feel like like a lot of people have probably come into the game thinking like, oh, like it's not going to work on me. And then it's like, well, it's happening real fast when I'm in front of you. And I'm also running real fast. So good luck keeping up. But um, I feel like that's just kind of like a big part of it. I catch people off guard a little bit. And even once people are on guard, I have a lot of things to me. I have wiggle, I have IQ, a lot of ways to win, that I utilize to be successful.
And one of the things about being a receiver, which I think some people talk about it, but not that much, is the relationship with the quarterback. And I think in recent years, there's been a bit of a rotating door with you. Like, how difficult is that whenever there is somebody else under center, when you're really trying to build that relationship and the chemistry and the timing to keep on having somebody else there? And of course, going into this year, hopefully you have some more sustained success there with somebody. But like, how difficult could that be at times when there's somebody else always under center?
It's really difficult. You try not to make excuses in the NFL and all that, but the reality is like it's night and day. A lot of cases it really is. Whether you go from even something simple like if you play with a tall quarterback and then your backup's a short quarterback, it's like, well, I just went from being able to see the ball to now I can't see the ball. So it's like pitching, I guess I'd imagine in baseball. It's like if you eliminate any of the time for your eye to be able to track the ball, like that's obviously going to increase your difficulty level. So and then different quarterbacks have different aggressive levels of whether they want to push the ball down the field, whether they're more conservative, what they consider a winning position. So there's so much nuance to it. And all of those things are you're trying to adjust while also playing your game though, as a receiver. So it's definitely been I've played with a lot of quarterbacks in my career, and I've just tried my best to like be as friendly to them as possible, be as open as possible so they feel good about throwing me the ball.
And one of the things also is part of it also, which might be a little bit difficult about it, is being a New York athlete, which you've been your entire career, means facing a level of scrutiny and attention that players in other markets probably don't have. How do you kind of handle the highs and lows of performance related attention in the media, whether it's positive or negative, and sometimes asking you those questions where they're trying to get something out of you and you have to try to stay composed with all of it?
Yeah, the New York media is a beast for sure. It's definitely is a beast for sure, but it's a beast both ways. So it's like, when you're balling, people are gonna think you're Jesus. When you're not balling, they're gonna make sure they're just as loud as about you sucking too. And I've been on both sides of that coin plenty of times. So, you just kind of learn to roll with the punches though. All you can do is do the best that you can and prepare and be ready. And if you are prepared, if you are ready, the ball's gonna go your when I say the ball goes your way, not necessarily thrown as a receiver, but I'm saying it'll go your way in the sense of positive things will happen. More times than not, if you're prepared and you're skilled and you're ready. So that's just the way I try to look at it. I was like, at the end of the day, somebody can only say something bad if I do something bad. So
You know, yeah, we were talking about quarterbacks before and just the media and everything. And I wanted to ask you, I think one of your closest relationships you've had with the Giants was with Daniel. Both of you were in the same draft class. Just curious to hear from you, like seeing everything unfold last year for somebody who was your quarterback, but also a friend. What what did you feel like? How weird was it? And of course, I guess seeing him bounce back now with a chance to be a starting quarterback somewhere else.
yeah, it was definitely, not ideal situation, as a both a friend and a football player. I on both pieces of me, wasn't ideal. But at the end of the day, like he knows what this business is. I know what this business is. It's results based. And we weren't good enough the previous few years on offense. And typically the tip of that spear is the quarterback. So, if your offense continues to not be good and you add weapons and all that and you're still not good, like that's ultimately where the buck stops, in this league. So, it was what it was, but I think he'll show who he is where he is now. And I think that he will be a successful quarterback in this league. And I feel like Sam Darnold kind of just showed everybody that, like, you know, this league is largely about being in the right place at the right time.
Mhm.
Like and that's not to take anything away from any player that's skilled or been good in this league, but most of the people that are succeeding at a high level, they're succeeding for a reason. Like they're in a situation where they can. And there's certainly a lot of guys in this league that have succeeded or not succeeded as much due to the circumstances they're under.
Situations definitely matter a lot. You mentioned Sam. Baker Mayfield had the same thing. Geno Smith has had the same thing, and Daniel is looking to have the same thing now that he's in Indianapolis. I do want to pivot back to you for a second. Just talk about, I guess, the business of football. And there's two different things I want to bring up of here. First of all, just this offseason when you become a free agent for the first time and kind of get to see the entire open market and what's out there. What was that process like for you? And of course, ending up back with the Giants on a 3-year deal. But just being the reality of having all these options out there and being a free agent. I know you had a new agent as well. Just what was that process like in the entire whirlwind of it?
Yeah, it was crazy. Free agency is a crazy time. People pop out of the woodworks. This team is pursuing you, and then they sign somebody else, and then this team makes a trade, and there's so much chaos that goes on. Every day it's like you wake up and you just are like trying not to stare at your phone all day, but at any moment you get a phone call about this or that. So it was a whirlwind, but ultimately I ended up back with the Giants, and I was happy with that decision.
But one of the reasons I have a lot of respect for you is because I feel like you've had to fight through some tough and I think unfair situations as well. And I remember it kind of vividly. I love the business of football. I love the behind the scenes of everything. But before your final year of your rookie contract, you earned extra money through the NFL's escalator system, which essentially rewards players for outdoing their rookie contracts. And that money is not guaranteed. And I remember that entire training camp, you were buried in the depth chart. They wanted you to take a pay cut, and it was really unfair. And it's a system that should go away. But that entire situation, how did you handle that adversity? And what did it teach you about just the business side of the NFL and how real that really is?
Um, it was certainly a tough time, a rough time, but I also look at any situation I ever find myself in, and I find the self accountability in it. And reality is during OTAs that year, like I didn't put my best foot forward during OTAs, and that was this new regime that we have now. So that was our first time seeing us on the grass, and obviously first impressions and anything in life typically stick with people. And so that camp, I came out that camp that year, and I had a good camp. Like I played well during camp, I just didn't play well during OTAs, and but I for whatever reason, I wasn't able to overcome that stigma in their mind over camp, and it led to putting in a predicament that I was in. And you know, obviously at that point in time, like I'd already led the team in receiving 2 out of my first 3 years, never while also never leading I still have never led the team in targets, and I've led the team in receiving 3 or 4 times. So at the time, like I kind of felt like ultimately OTAs, like I respect any practice, I respect any setting, but it's like I've shown myself over 3 years in real NFL games, what I'm capable of, and I thought, whatever. But it just goes to show in life you can never assume, and you never, and ultimately it was a good life. It was a good lesson for me anyways, of just every day there's never a point where you get so good that you come out on any given day and you can just be like, oh yeah, I'm so good that like this bad day is okay. It's like every day in this league, you have to come out, you have to be on top of it, and you have to show why you are who you are. And that's a little bit of the beauty of this league, to be honest, if you're a competitor. But certainly from a business standpoint, I felt like I earned, that part of my contract, and they wanted to take it back. And I obviously I ended up, giving it back. I didn't have much of a choice. But, and I was a healthy scratch week 1 that week, which is the first time in my career that I was ever in that predicament. Not even as a 5th round rookie was I ever in that predicament. So, it was a lot of firsts, but it taught me a lot, and it's God has his purposes for things in his life, and must have been to keep me sharp or whatever it was. So ultimately, I'm grateful.
Well, you led the Giants in receiving in 4 of your first 5 seasons in the NFL, so even more than what you thought, which is very impressive. And just going back through everything and listening through your entire journey, do you ever like look back at everything from being that 5th round rookie and making it to the field and putting production, then having the pay cut, and then getting your first extension, and now getting this extension or this free agent contract this offseason? Do you ever look back at the entire path that it's taken you and how there were so many, I guess, bumps in the road, but now here you are as, a top paid receiver on the team?
For sure. I trust me. I mean, Stephon Diggs went in the 5th round, Puka went in the 5th round and I look at those guys and I'm like, well, dang, they balled as a rookie and their team's bought in, and look at how their stuff's going. I was like, I bought as a rookie, and I came back my second year, and obviously they fired the whole staff. I had a whole new staff my second year, and it's like there was no buy-in from the new staff. So it was like,
Mhm.
of course, you look at other guys and situations, and you're like, man, like that looks super nice. But at the end of the day, like everybody's path is that path for a reason. My path is what it is for a reason. And I can say that one beautiful thing that's come of it is that like I'm now in a position in my seventh year in the league where there's nobody on our team that I can't relate to.
Mhm.
If you're an undrafted late round guy, I know what it's like to be you. If you're one of the highest paid guys in your position room, I now know what it's like to be you. Have you ever, been a guy who's had 10 plus targets in a game? I know what it's like to be you. Did you ball as a rookie? I know what it's like to be you. Have you, played multiple years and had matchups with number one corners and things like that? I know what it's like to be you. So I like the range that I have now in a locker room, like really helps me because in the NFL, there's always somebody in the situation that I was in. Every year, there's guys on the team like that, and those guys need encouragement, they need perspective, and I always the guys that were around for me, they watched me go through it, and they saw how I came out the other side. And the guys that don't know, I always let them know. I was like, look, like wherever you are and wherever you're at in your career doesn't define like where you're going to be the rest of your time, because you know sometimes people lose sight of the fact that like the same people who took the money from me are the same people that have paid me 2 deals. So it's not a matter of, once you get buried, you can't dig your way out. You just have to be committed to it. And you have to, be sharp and be on top of your stuff and see the light at the end of the tunnel.
It's pretty awesome perspective. And do you feel like you are somebody who now has that, I guess, that thing on your shoulder where you could be that leader for the team, for this coaching staff, that they could rely on you to be that guy? Because everything you just said, I mean, I think there are players in that locker room who might be willing to run through a brick wall based off everything you just said. Like, do you feel that you're somebody who could become that type of a leader this year, knowing that at least you have that security moving forward?
Yeah, no doubt. I'm not as much as a rah-rah cheerleader leader, but if I would say my leadership style is more so that, if a guy comes to me with something or says something to me or asks me something, I share what I think. I share where I've been in my career and where I think that they can be if they do whatever they need to do. And, that's definitely something that I take on wholeheartedly now for sure. Because at the end of the day, like the only way we're going to be a good team is if we get the best out of everybody. So, you can't have a guy walking around being like, oh man, I only got, 3 reps today. Like coach hates me. Like I'm never going to get a chance to play. And I'm like, listen, brother, I had every right. I led the team for 2 years and then I was a healthy scratch. So I was like, you ain't even did nothing yet. Like this is your second year. Like you ain't even got a chance to play yet. So it's like, you don't even, it's like, I already did stuff and ended up where I ended up. So I was like, trust the process, keep working. And like, at the end of the day, like just take advantage of your opportunities. A lot of times, conversation I've had with guys. I had a conversation with a guy today, actually. I was like, a lot of times what gets lost in like me now, and it's like I'm on the other side of it, is that like that year where like I took the pay cut and like I was healthy scratch week 1, like, and I didn't really play over the first 4 weeks for real, give me balls. Like when week 5 came, my opportunity came, like I had a great game. And I was like, nobody knows when your opportunity comes. And it might not even be in an ideal situation. But at the end of the day, like you either seize that opportunity when it comes or you don't. And that could determine it. For me, it shifted the trajectory of my career, but you never know when that moment is. So all you can do is be ready for it.
Darius, you're such a well-spoken person. You've gone through so much here in the NFL. And one of the things that I noticed about you this offseason is you do have a bit of a strong following on Twitter with football analysis and reacting to news. And you prove that you know ball. I mean, this offseason with the whole Shador Sanders and tapping the ball and whatever. Do you feel like you're somebody who could potentially step into this world of being an opinionated person or the media world whatever football does come to now, whenever that is, because I feel like you do have that potential if you ever want to.
Yeah. You're not the first person that said that to me. And I've never thought of myself as a media person. You got the good hair and all that, you're a on camera guy. I've never really thought myself as an on camera guy, but, it's one of those things where it's something I could probably get behind, but I also, I would have to be able to be in some capacity where I could just tell the truth. And like in that Shador Sanders case, like matter of fact, there was something I almost commented on a couple days ago. I fight all the time, like letting stuff go on Twitter between saying something, not saying something. Cause I just, I'm passionate about the game. I know what I'm talking about, but maybe I was like, maybe. When I
You
get
know,
done,
let me test you. Let me test you. I don't want to make you feel old, but you were in the NFL when we had 16 games a year.
yeah,
We're now at 17 games. There's talk about 18 games during your playing career. What are your thoughts on that?
I thought the 17 was insane. So 18 is like I can't even 18 and international, more international, which
Yeah.
is just like all things I can barely wrap my mind around. But at the end of the day, like these are all CBA negotiated things as well. So
Hmm.
it's like we could certainly make cases for things that we could change in our CBA that it wouldn't make it great, but it would certainly make it a lot better. And so that's going to be on us as a player union and the PA to fight for the things that we would need in return if we were to add an 18th game. But it's certainly not ideal for the players.
As a player, is because I had like Levante David on the show, and he's been in the league forever. He was with the 16 games for a long time. Obviously, 17 games. He's a linebacker. He's like in a car crash like every play. He said adding one more game is like five more games in her body. Like, what would be for a player something that would actually be worth it? Is to buy something that has to come in? Is it getting to free agency early? Like, what are some things that you feel like would actually help as a player if it ever got to that point?
I think it probably three things that I would say are primary. A situation I was in where they can retract the literally the escalator is there for guys who come into the league disadvantaged to have a chance to make a little money. So
Why is it not guaranteed? It makes no sense that it's not.
no sense for that to be able to be taken away. Like I earned it.
Mhm.
That's why just don't put it there then. If it's
Mhm.
like earning, you can take it. Why put it there? So those need to be guaranteed. That and then the revenue share. If we could just get another even 1% or 1.5% to make it, 49 and a half, whatever. I think it's 48 and a half right now. I think even if we get to like 49 and a half, you're talking that 1% in that instance, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars.
Mhm. Mhm.
Salary cap to all the places that could go. Like that 1% is very, very valuable. That's why they're holding on to it so tight. But those two things for sure. And then three, like I definitely think like I don't know about two buys because like getting yourself going after a buy is a hard thing.
Yeah.
And I don't
So
really know like
the NFL's data, for what it's worth, does show that after a bye, there's more soft tissue injuries. For what it's worth, so that's why they're actually scared about that.
yeah, exactly. I don't know that two buys, especially because you get a mini buy on Thursday night. So it's like, I don't know if I would say another buy is necessary, but I would say, definitely those first two things. And the third thing would be like each team's investment in the training staff and the body maintenance, like that could definitely be higher, like across the board of just as far as like anything you need access to keep your body right or get your body right. Like there could be more money put there to handle that. And I'm on a team that actually does probably one of the best jobs in the league.
Mhm.
But I just know for a fact, like just listening to guys across the league, like that could certainly be higher. So if you wanted people's bodies hold up, like that's a department where you could pour more money into and at least help guys more.
So while we're on this topic, I feel like this would actually be perfect for you as well. When you were a free agent and you mentioned all the stuff that happens behind the scenes in a building that could be improved, were you somebody who actually looked through that NFLPA report card for every single team and saw like, oh, this team does it good, this team does it bad, or is it ultimately for most players just down to whoever gives me the best contract and that's it?
Yeah, no. I mean, the teams I was interested in, I like to like call players because they're living it. And players are not gonna lie. So it's like if I call, my buddy on I talked to one of my boys. At one point, the Panthers were kind of sniffing around. So one of my guys I went to college with, Derek Brown, plays for the Panthers. Obviously, he's a franchise player for the Panthers.
Mhm.
And, I had a conversation with him and, just asking about, how's this, how's that, how's it? And like players are going to tell you the real. So, because report cards are like, there's a lot of opinions in there that you don't know how valid or invalid they are, so,
Yeah.
you know, any team that I might have considered, I definitely knew. At this point, I played long enough. I probably know somebody on every team. And so I would definitely get a player opinion of like, hey, what's it like over there? Like, what do they got going on type of deal.
All right, I love it. We're running out of time over here. So I'm going to ask you a couple more things before I wrap it up. First of all, you've made it one of the best things about you off the field is you've made it a big deal when it comes to the community and giving back. That's why in 2025 you are the Alan Page Community Award winner, which is given by the NFLPA. I mentioned before for the NFL, you are the Walton Payton Man of the Year nominee. I know the official award went to Rick Armstead, but you were the guy for the New York Giants. You founded the Left Hand, Right Hand Foundation, and you run this skill camp that provides opportunities for hundreds upon hundreds of kids. Could you tell us more about the camp and why is it so important for you to be out there in the community the way you are?
I think it's just if nothing else, it's an example. I try to be an example for other guys who are in my position or who have made in my position, and everything I do is mostly focused towards the youth because it's something that when I think back on my life, I'm like, man, like when I was in middle school and I was in high school, like how cool would it have been for an NFL player to come back and put on a camp and me be able to talk to him, be around him, and he tells me like instructions and stuff, whatever. And so that's like the mind space that it comes from, is I'm like, I don't really think that, anybody, if you come from any type of disadvantaged situation or whatever, it's like how you make it to the other side and you don't ever think to yourself like, man, when I was fighting my way through this, how nice it would have been to have had like a little nugget or whatever. It's like, that just doesn't sit right with me as a person. Like, and that's not me judging anybody else. Like, it just doesn't sit right with me, and that's why I do what I do. But, I would encourage any guy, that's made it to any point in life. Like, hey, like at one point in time, you were somebody striving to do something too. And it's like, it would have been nice to get a little, push up the ladder in any way.
Pretty awesome. And this is the stuff that deserves more attention and recognition. It's not just the stuff that you do on the field, but off the field, you are a very, very big part of the community. You deserve a lot of kudos for that. All right. Last question, Darius. I ask this to every single guest who comes here on the show. You could take a player, a coach, an executive, anybody around the game of football. Who do you think deserves to be in the spotlight here in the future?
I would probably have to say Olamide Zaccheaus.
Wow.
He's a receiver for the Bears, undrafted guy. He's been on a couple teams, and like his career, like my career numbers, at least they're respectable enough to reflect that, like whatever. Like I was pretty good or whatever in some years, but like his career numbers wouldn't warrant that. But what he's done, where he's been, has been impactful on the teams that he's been on. And like last year, him being on the Commanders is like, I don't remember what his stats were, but like you won't see like 800-900 yards. I don't whatever it was. But like if you watch Commanders games, like he made multiple plays to help that team win, and it propelled him to getting a deal with the Bears. And I also know him personally. I train with him, but like I have a lot of respect for him, and I feel like he's a great. If you're an undrafted guy and you want to know how to work your way and find your way through this league, like he's somebody that's done it and has done it in a way of just grinding and being ready for and taking advantage of every opportunity that they've gotten.
Well, if you were to ask an average fan or even an avid fan right now how many yards he had last year with the Commanders, I don't think anybody would answer 506 yards, and that's what he did last year
Yeah.
in Washington. So
Yeah.
it's quite impressive, and it's a perfect answer for what that question is. And we're going to work on trying to get in here on the show because his career path, like you said, undrafted, Atlanta, Philly, Washington, and now in Chicago. We'll be keeping a close eye on him, but we'll try to get him here on the show as well. But Darius, I want to thank you for coming on, going through your journey, your career, the ups, the downs, the way you came back out of all of it, and now the person you've become, the man you've become, and everything you do on the field and off the field. It was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Special thanks to New York Giants wide receiver Darius Slayton for joining us here on the show. And I really enjoyed that conversation and just him talking about he's been through basically all of it. And him in the locker room now with the Giants, you could be this, you could be that. I've been all of it. And him basically being the highest paid receiver on the team right now, knowing that he has that security and basically coming through after all that he's gone through. He talked about, I don't really know how many fans know about this performance escalator the NFL has. I remember it like it happened yesterday. The Giants made him take that pay cut. He was a fifth-round pick. He's barely made money in his career so far, and now they're taking money away from him. I think that's the first time he's really publicly spoken about it, and hearing him talk about it and how much it probably bothered him a lot and how he was a healthy scratch and how he basically decided I'm going to take my opportunities when it comes and step up. And he did. And once again, he put up numbers for the Giants once he got on the field in that week 5 game. And the rest was kind of history. And now this offseason got that 3-year, $36 million deal to go back to the Giants. This is somebody who ultimately ended up on top, and he was a perfect spotlight guest interview for this week's show. All right, let's wrap it up here on this Tuesday. Let's talk about some things happening around the NFL. Let me bring in my good friend Ben Allen. Ben, what is going on? That was a really fun conversation.
Oh, yeah, it was fantastic. We were really honored to have him on here. We love having the current players. If you guys have recommendations, shoot it over to us. A lot of these guys do see it when you tag them, so it's always nice to be able to have that. Darius, somebody who is active on social media, I'm sure he appreciates the interactions as well. So let's go ahead and talk about what is going on in the football world today, and that being a major cut coming out of Green Bay. Jaire Alexander, the longtime two-time Pro Bowl cornerback for the Green Bay Packers, has been cut after 7 years. This has been coming off the heels of conversations for a while that they might be looking to trade him. There was talks about Buffalo. There were some talks about some other teams. Ultimately, I guess not super surprising, Ari. What can you add to this story as well as what comes next for Jaire?
So the interesting thing is we did like a cut candidates episode back in February. I think it was right after the combine. And I put Jaire Alexander on that list, and he was always on the cusp of being moved on from in Green Bay. But the Packers were like, we're looking at the free agent cornerback market. We're looking at the rest of the trade market. We're looking at the draft class with the cornerbacks. They felt like Jaire Alexander, who had missed multiple games, he missed 10 games last year, 10 games the year before that. 4 years ago, I believe he only played 4 games that entire season. He has struggled with injuries, but when he's on the field, this is one of the best cornerbacks in football. At one point, was the highest paid cornerback in the NFL, and it's not like he's an old player. He just turned 28 back in February. So they were like, we could probably get something for him, and that was the reason why they were like, we anyways don't owe him any money this year. All his money is non-guaranteed. None of it will trigger at any point. So we could take our time over here. I don't think Jaire Alexander's camp kind of appreciated that, but they understood the situation. And as the offseason went on, yeah, the Packers spoke to some teams, but all these teams who spoke to the Packers were like, we're willing to trade for him and give up something, but we're not going to pay him $17.5 million this year. We're going to need that contract to be adjusted. And as soon as they spoke to the agent was like, no, take on the contract the way it is, or just wait for him to be released. And that's basically what happened throughout the offseason. And essentially, we get to mandatory minicamp, which is starting this week for the Packers. They were like, if Jaire reports to camp and he somehow suffers an injury, which could be a season-ending one, we're going to have to owe him everything. So they were like, we're going to move on now and basically cut it over and say enough is enough. We're not going to risk the potential injury here. And that's essentially what they did over here by moving on. Yes, both sides did have some conversation about keeping him in Green Bay on a revised contract, but those talks did not go so far. And really, you look throughout the course of his career in Green Bay, first-round pick, he was the first pick by GM Brian Gutekunst over the course of his rookie contract. Like I said, was one of the very best quarterbacks in football ever since getting the extension. Was a little bit up and down when it came to being on the field. He, of course, also had I guess it's an on-the-field incident. If you all recall, in a game versus the Panthers, he went out for the coin toss when he was not a captain, but he did it anyways because he's from Charlotte, and then he called heads or tails. The Packers won the toss, and essentially he said, we want to be on defense. And NFL rules is if you don't say defer or we want to receive, essentially the officials could say, okay, that means you're going to be on defense for the start of the first half and the start of the second half. Luckily, the ref asked him, are you sure? And somebody came in and said, no, we defer. But as a result, he got a 1-game suspension by the team for conduct detrimental to the organization. He was always a little bit on shaky grounds, not because he's a bad person or off the field, but a little bit of a character sometimes. And sometimes when it's time to be serious, he wasn't so serious. So that was a little bit of a problem in Green Bay. But that cornerback room right now in Green Bay with Jaire Alexander, it's one that is very interesting. They signed Nate Hobbs this offseason. They have Keyshawn Nixon, who's a very good returner, but they're also going to use him as a cornerback. They have Valentine there. They need to add one more guy there, and we'll see what that ends up being. But this is a move that will save them a ton of cash, over $17 million in cash, and cap space as well. They're going to take on some dead money, north of $15 million in dead money as part of the release. It's going to be split up over here in 2025 and in 2026 because it's after June 1st. But overall, it's a player who had a pretty good career in Green Bay, a player who believes he still has a lot of gas left in the tank. And the question now becomes, who will be out there and interested in getting him? And I look around the NFL, I would imagine it's going to be a one-year contract. I would imagine it's going to be some guaranteed money, but a lot of incentives as well for him to be on the field. But I look around the NFL, this will be a classic Baltimore Ravens signing, a guy in June who could help them during the season. Lamar Jackson, Jaire Alexander, they were college teammates. They were in the same draft. I could see that being a possibility. There are a bunch of teams around the NFL who could definitely use some cornerback help. So I would expect his market to be good, but I could also see a scenario here where the agent and Jaire Alexander decide that there's no reason to rush this and sign right now. We could wait until training camp starts, wait for the inevitable injuries that are going to happen around the NFL, wait for some of these coaches to see their quarterbacks and realize, like, oh my God, we need another good talent on the roster. And eventually the money is going to go even higher than they were expecting. So I would be surprised if there's a resolution right away in his future, but this is something that might take some time. But this is a player who usually does not end up on the free agent market in June. And now we have a player like him on the market.
He's certainly going to be making some fan base very happy here, hopefully in the near future, so we can talk about it here on NFL Spotlight, where you guys should make sure you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all those fun places. Hit us up with ideas. Hit us up with guest suggestions. We are always listening. I pay attention to a lot of the comments, all of the great things that are said about me. And, they just throw me a compliment every once in a while or something. Yeah, build it up. I need that. Ari doesn't. Ari gets all the stuff in the comments and being called great things and stuff. But help me out a little bit. I don't know. Just things. Just things.
Well, for people who don't know, Ben does do a lot of the behind the scenes work besides for being on camera every single day. He's the guy who's responsible for getting the show up on YouTube and everywhere else, Apple, Spotify, and whatever it is. So it's Ben, there's Will, a lot of really good behind the scenes people here at the 33rd team. But that will do it here for our Tuesday, June 10 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. We will be back here tomorrow morning talking more about what's happening around the NFL, the latest news, and the ripple effects it has around the game of football. Mandatory minicamp is officially open for some teams. All NFL teams will have their minicamp here in the next few days going into next week. And then it's officially summer break for everyone around the NFL. But NFL Spotlight, it's not going anywhere. So we will be back here tomorrow morning, and we will see you then.